Welcome to Sleep and Wander. Tonight, we're traveling somewhere beautiful. Let yourself get comfortable now. Uncurl any tension in your shoulders. Let your hands rest heavy and allow your breathing to slow. There is nowhere you need to be tonight. Nothing you need to remember. Nothing left to do. Just let yourself drift and wander. It is early evening in Lisbon, the kind of evening that arrives quietly, without announcement. When the last pale light slips behind the hills and the city exhales. His name is Daniel, and he has no particular place to be. He arrived in Lisbon 3 days ago with a small leather bag, a paperback he hasn't opened, and a loose plan to simply walk and see what the city offered him. Tonight, it is offering rain. It began as the softest suggestion, a faint darkening of the cobblestones beneath his feet, a coolness against his forearms. He paused on a narrow street in Alfama, the oldest quarter of the city, and looked up. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, deep violet at the edges, fading to a dim pewter overhead. And between the close-pressed buildings on either side, it felt less like a sky and more like a narrow corridor leading somewhere far above. The first drops fell, not heavily, not urgently, just quietly, the way rain falls when it has all the time in the world. He didn't hurry. He had learned over the last 3 days that Lisbon was not a city that rewarded hurrying. Its streets were too steep, too winding, too full of unexpected beauty to be rushed through. Every alley seemed to lead somewhere worth stopping. Every corner seemed to hold a view that asked you to simply stand still for a moment and look. So he stood still and let the rain come. Pause 3 seconds. The cobblestones around him darkened slowly, absorbing the rain in spreading patches, like ink bleeding into old paper. They were beautiful cobblestones, small and irregular, laid by hand in flowing patterns. Calcada Portuguesa, the locals called it. Portuguese pavement. Black and white stones fitted together in waves and geometric shapes that had been walked upon for centuries. Under the lamplight, wet now and gleaming, they looked like the surface of a quiet river. Daniel began to walk again, slowly, his footsteps making soft sounds against the stone. The streets of Alfama were quiet at this hour. A few locals moved past with umbrellas or hoods pulled up, nodding as they went. Somewhere ahead, a yellow tram sat at a stop, its warm interior light spilling out onto the wet street like a small, patient lantern. He passed a bakery that had nearly closed for the evening. A woman inside was wiping down the counter, the glass case almost empty now. Just a few pastel de nata left, those small, beloved custard tarts in their fluted pastry shells, golden and caramelized on top. The smell drifted through the half-open door. Warm pastry, vanilla, a suggestion of cinnamon. He paused. 2 seconds. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled the way people smile and cities that are used to wanderers. He bought the last 2 tarts, wrapped in a small square of wax paper. They were still warm. He ate one slowly as he walked, standing briefly under the shallow overhang of a doorway while the rain thickened slightly, the pastry crumbling softly, the custard cool and sweet against the warm shell. He saved the second one for later, tucking it carefully into his jacket pocket. These were the small ceremonies of slow travel he had come to understand, the unhurried rituals that gave a day its shape when you had removed all the usual obligations from it. A pastry eaten in a doorway while it rained, a tram watched from a distance, a street followed simply because it sloped downward towards something that glittered. He followed the street downward. It curved gently to the left, narrowing as it went, the buildings pressing closer on either side, their facades painted in the colors Lisbon loved, terracotta and ochre and a faded, dusty yellow that looked like sunlight preserved in plaster. Many of the buildings were tiled in azulejos, the famous Portuguese ceramic tiles, blue and white or green and white, depicting scenes that had been fired into the glaze 100 years ago and would remain there 100 years from now. Boats on rivers, pastoral landscapes, geometric borders of impossible intricacy. In the rain, the tiles gleamed. Daniel ran his fingertips lightly along one wall as he passed, feeling the slight ridges between tiles, the cool smoothness of the glaze, the faint roughness at the edges where time had worked at the grout. The city existed in layers like this. The very old and the merely old sitting comfortably side by side. Nothing demanded to be the newest thing in the room. He found this deeply restful. Pause 3 seconds. The street opened without warning into a small miradoro, one of Lisbon's famous viewpoints, a terrace that jutted out over the hillside and offered the city spread below like a painting someone had left out to dry. He was alone up here tonight. The rain had driven most people indoors, but Daniel stood at the iron railing and looked out. Below him, the city descended in gentle tiers toward the wide silver band of the Tagus River, its lights reflected in the wet rooftops and streets below, orange and gold, and the occasional soft blue of a television in a window. The river itself was vast and calm, a slow-moving darkness that merged almost imperceptibly with the sky at its far edge. A single boat moved across it, unhurried, its lights doubling in the water below it. The rain fell steadily now, a soft, consistent presence that blurred the edges of everything it touched, the far shore, the distant bridge, the orange glow of the city spreading upward into the low clouds. Everything was soft, everything was muted, everything was still in the way that cities become still in the rain, not empty, but quietened, turned inward. Daniel leaned against the railing and breathed. Pause. 4 seconds. He didn't know how long he stood there. Time moved differently at viewpoints in the rain. It pooled and spread like the water on the cobblestones below, losing its usual urgency. Eventually, he turned from the railing and found a small tasco, a tiny traditional tavern, tucked into the corner where the terrace met the street, its door open, warm amber light falling out across the wet stone. Inside there were perhaps 6 small tables, mismatched chairs, walls hung with old photographs, and a faded tile panel showing a sailing ship. A counter at the back with bottles arranged in no particular order. An older man sat at the counter reading a newspaper, a small glass of wine beside him. He looked up as Daniel entered, gestured at the tables with a slight lift of his chin, and returned to his newspaper. Daniel chose the table nearest the window, a small square of marble on a single iron leg, and sat down in a chair that creaked pleasantly when he settled into it. The rain moved across the window in slow diagonal lines. He ordered a glass of red wine, vino tinto, por favor, and the man brought it without ceremony. A small, unpretentious glass of something dark and warm. Pause. 2 seconds. Daniel wrapped his hands around the glass and looked out through the rain-blurred window. The street outside was empty now, just the wet cobblestones and the lamplight and the steady, quiet percussion of rain on stone. Somewhere deeper in the building, almost too faint to be certain of, he could hear music, fado, the most Lisbon of all sounds, Portugal's great melancholy music, guitar and voice woven together in something that was not quite sadness and not quite longing, but lived in the quiet space between them. The singer's voice rose and fell like something breathing. Daniel closed his eyes. The wine was soft on his tongue. The chair was warm beneath him. The rain continued its gentle work against the window, and the fado drifted through the walls like something that had always been there, like the building itself was remembering. His breathing slowed. His shoulders, which he hadn't realized were still carrying the last of the day's tension, released. Pause. 4 seconds. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Lisbon, on the cobblestones of Alfama, still gleaming under their lamps, on the tiled facades of the old buildings, running in thin rivers between the blue and white panels, on the wide, patient surface of the Tagus, where the single boat had long since disappeared into the soft darkness, on the rooftops, the terraces, the iron railings of the Miradouro, the empty cafe chairs still outside under awnings, their cushions long since taken in. The city received it all quietly, as it had received 1,000 evenings like this one, 1,000 wanderers in 1,000 doorways, 1,000 small glasses of wine in 1,000 warm, unhurried rooms. Daniel sat in his creaking chair and let himself become part of it. Just another evening in Lisbon. Just the rain and the fado and the soft amber light and the growing comfortable weight of rest arriving, unhurried, patient, exactly on time. Let yourself stay here as long as you need. There is no rush. Daniel sits a little longer in his creaking chair, his eyes still closed, the wine glass nearly empty, the fado now just a murmur through the walls, and slowly, even the music fades, until there is only the rain. Just sit here now, in this warm little room in Lisbon, and listen. Listen to the rain on the cobblestones outside, each drop finding its place, joining the slow rivers running between the stones, gathering in the low places, glittering under the lamps. You don't need to follow any thoughts tonight. You don't need to go anywhere. Just the rain and the amber light and the distant sound of the river somewhere below in the dark. Let it carry you further and further from the day behind you, deeper and deeper into the quiet, into rest, into sleep.